Lesson 4, Kentucky's Pack Horse Librarians. The Great Depression that followed the 1929 stock market crash was a time when many people went without food, money, or homes. Times were hard in big cities, small towns, and rural communities. People had lost their jobs. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to help as many people as possible to find work. So he started an organization called the Works Progress Administration, or WPA. Through the WPA, people got jobs doing all kinds of things. Some built schools, hospitals, and roads, while others painted murals in post offices and wrote guidebooks. Some even delivered library books on horseback. In 1936, the WPA established a new work program called the Pack Horse Library Project. As part of this project, librarians rode on horseback to distribute books and magazines to small rural communities tucked into the mountains of eastern Kentucky. The people in this region lived especially hard lives during the Depression. They had few schools and no libraries. People didn't have electricity or telephones, and they used horses in horse-drawn wagons instead of cars. The founders of the Pack Horse Library Project aimed to connect the people of rural eastern Kentucky to ideas and events happening around the world by bringing them a variety of reading materials. Here's how the program worked. A small library was set up in each mountain county. Books and magazines were donated to the library by churches, colleges, and larger libraries. Each library had one librarian who monitored the books and kept them organized. 5 or 6 pack horse librarians, or carriers, would bring the materials to drop-off points in the mountains. A drop-off point might be a church, a one-room school, or a home. Pack horse librarians, who were almost always women, came from the mountain communities they worked in. Their faces were familiar, and as a result, they were welcomed by most people. The librarians were paid $28 a month. Not a lot of money, but it was a good wage during the Depression. They had to provide their own horses, so many rented horses from local farmers for 50 cents a week. Their days began early at the small county library, where they chose reading materials and packed them into saddlebags. There were very few roads in the mountains, and none were paved. The carriers took rugged mountain paths, cutting through the woods and riding over rocky, muddy ground. They often used creek beds as roads because they were flat and easy to follow. When a path took them up or down a steep hillside, riders got off their horses to keep the animals from slipping and falling. When the hill was too steep, carriers tied up their horses and continued by foot. Rain, snow, and sleet made the trips more difficult, but like mail carriers, the horseback librarians didn't let the weather stop them. They traveled between 50 and 80 miles a week. For people living in the eastern Kentucky mountains, the most exciting days of the month were the days the bookwoman visited. Young and old crowded around the bookwoman, eager to see what she had brought. She handed out picture books, novels, and poetry. Magazines like Popular Mechanics, Women's Home Companion, and National Geographic were especially popular. The bookwomen also distributed reading materials to one-room schoolhouses where the books and magazines would circulate through all the students in the schoolroom. The pack horse librarians had many stops to make, but they didn't hurry. Connecting with the people on the rural routes was part of the job. People liked to chat with the librarians and ask questions, such as how to care for a sick child. Librarians often took the time to read aloud to an injured worker, an elderly person, or a child who couldn't go to school. They also brought badly needed medicines and delivered news from other mountain families. Sometimes a carrier was asked to contact a doctor or a midwife. Although the pack horse libraries received many book and magazine donations, they always needed more reading materials. Librarians were constantly repairing the materials to make them last as long as possible. They passed out bookmarks made out of old Christmas cards so people would not dog-ear the pages in books. Nevertheless, the materials eventually became so worn they could no longer be repaired. Hard-working librarians clipped pictures and articles from the tattered pages and used them to make scrapbooks, which were distributed with the books and magazines. All WPA programs were cut back in 1942 as the United States got ready for war. In 1943, money for the Pack Horse Library project stopped altogether, and the program ended. The communities in rural eastern Kentucky no longer had access to reading materials. However, this was only temporary. After county roads were improved, bookmobiles began to appear in the mountain communities. The Pack Horse Librarians continued to deliver more than books and magazines. They brought new ideas, information about hundreds of topics, and a love of reading to the people of Kentucky.